Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on navigating the servicing decision. Before we dive into today's topic, I'm going to run you through some items to help you best leverage our platform. Your webinar dashboard is interactive and customizable. You can personalize your view by moving, resizing, or hiding different elements on the screen. Simply use the corners of the icon to adjust the size or the position of each box. We encourage you to engage with us using the interactive tools. If you have any questions throughout, please submit them using the questions box on the lower left corner of your dashboard. We will do our best to address your questions in real time. You will also notice a survey on your dashboard. Please fill this out anytime during the presentation. To let us know your thoughts throughout the presentation, use the emojis at the bottom of your screen. Your feedback is very valuable to us, and we use it to craft future webinars. Lastly, this session is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording within a couple of days. If you want a copy of the slide deck, you can download it from the left side of your screen at any time today. As a registrant for today's webinar, you will receive early access to Richie May's latest white paper. We will email that out after the webinar ends as well, so you get early access before the public does next week. For those of you who aren't familiar with Richie May, we have focused on serving the mortgage banking industry for over 40 years. We have a full suite of services and products designed specifically for lenders. Our experts believe in the forward progress and success of the industry and dedicate much of their time to teaching. Today, our presenters include two of our mortgage industry experts, Seth Sprague and Mignon Davis. We also have Andrew Pullman from Cenlar. I'll turn it over to Andrew to introduce Cenlar and kick off presenter introductions. Take it away, Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to Richie May for developing this really insightful white paper. It's a decision that many servicers make, deciding between in-house or sub-servicing. And it's a decision that needs to be made on a regular basis because things do change. So again, thank you for that. I think you'll all find a lot of great insight into this document. So first, a little bit about servicing. So to develop a cost-effective, compliant platform while also delivering a really great client experience. We serve over 100 clients today and over 2 million customers and members. Our clients include credit unions, banks, independent mortgage bankers, and MSR investors. And additionally, behind our core subservicing capabilities, we're also supporting our clients with liquidity for home equity production and rolling in MSR financing programs. Finally, we're celebrating our 150th anniversary next year, and we're completing our 25th year supporting credit unions. You could say that we practically invented subservicing, but we continue to innovate to build a better platform for our clients and a better experience for customers that we support. So with that, let me turn it over to Mignon to share more about the new white paper.
All right, thanks, Andrew, and thank you for having us on the webinar today. We appreciate you and Cenlar for co-hosting this with us. My name is Mignon Davis, and I have more than 20 years of industry experience with servicing. I've worked for a couple of servicers and sub-servicers over the years, and now focusing more on compliance, internal controls, risk assessment, risk management, operational processes, and all of the things that go into both originations and servicing. So very happy to be here and be able to speak with you all today. And I'll kick it over to Seth Sprague to let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Mignon, and thanks, Andrew. And again, thanks to the team at Cenlar for participating with us on this presentation today. And we look forward to actually distributing the white paper out to you. As Andrew kind of highlighted, put a lot of work into this. And my background is I've been in the mortgage space now 30 years, all around the servicing asset, whether it's valuations or strategies. So I'll kind of be your host and moderator today as we kind of walk through some of the highlights of the paper. But we strongly encourage you to, when you get the paper, read it, take a look, and reach out with any questions. We're happy to answer anything in regards to those papers. So without much further ado about my background, we've got an agenda here today. And as Gabby mentioned earlier, we'd love to get Q&A from you as well. So we're going to leave about probably 10 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A. And I know everyone that does a presentation always says that they leave 10 minutes for Q&A and then they leave like 5 seconds. But we are going to try to leave 10 minutes for Q&A today. So without much further ado, let's start with just some basics. These are just some very generic kind of background slides, just so we kind of level set for everyone on the call. This is from the MBA website. This is data from Recursion, I'm sorry. This is the top 25 agency servicers as of October 2025. And you can see a lot of familiar names on here. And again, remember, these are companies that own the MSR asset. So Cenlar does not show up on this list, but they will show up on a couple of other ones. This is the top residential subservicers as of June 30th, 2025. And as you note, Cenlar is number 2 in these rankings. But we do kind of want to point out that, Mr. Cooper Group, which is now part of Rocket, is also a mortgage originator. So when it comes to sort of traditional subservicers that aren't in the origination business, obviously Cenlar is the largest here. And as of June, almost 720 billion of servicing that's out there, and you can see their names on the list here as well. And then finally, and this is just more of just a level set slide, because we will talk a little bit about this throughout the presentation today, but cost data. This is from the MBA Servicing Operations Study Forum, and it's 2024 data, but these numbers don't move around a ton. But the difference sort of between large IMBs, large banks, mid-sized banks, and mid-sized IMBs, with the blue being the performing cost of service and the gray being the non-performing. And we're going to harp a little bit about kind of as we go through the paper, or highlights of the paper, I should say, about that non-performing segment of the population. And I'll try to keep my jokes to a minimum about how my dog might be able to service performing loans with a nice automated solution, which Andrew could certainly talk through. But at the end of the day, the delinquencies is really where the expense is, and there's a lot of considerations if you're going to bring servicing in-house using those the number of vendors that you'll need on the non-performing side. So kind of with that as just a very basic backdrop, we're going to kind of dive off here into some questions. And for most of these, all 3 of us will answer on one of them. We don't want to put Andrew in a difficult situation, so he won't be able to participate in one, but we'll grab him on the last one. But I'll start with you, Mignon, and I'll probably circle back to me. But what does the servicing landscape look like today? How's it evolving? What are you seeing? And for those that don't know, Mignon sort of undersold herself. She's actually in all the subservicers doing oversight. If you want somebody that has a lot of deep experience with all the subservicers, including Cenlar, Mignon knows it all. But how's this landscape changing? What's it look like? What's evolving? What trends are you seeing, Mignon?
Oh yeah, lots of changes going on in servicing. Lots of lost MIT changes over the past couple of years that they've had to be staying up to date on, and updating their technology tools to be able to handle these new loss mitigation products. A lot of regulation changes there, and then also the use of AI and other technology, borrower portals, and apps on the phone, to make payments, request payoffs. A lot of self-serve options are now out there for borrowers. Just a heavy investment in technology, whether it's borrower tools or data analytics, even for their clients. A lot of subservicers are putting out a lot of great data and dashboards for their clients to be able to manage their portfolio better and make strategic decisions based on the information that their subservicers are able to give them. Also, a hot topic is recapture. A lot of the subservicers are able to pull a lot of great data and information for their servicing clients to be able to recapture and reach out to borrowers or their customers when they want to refinance or get a HELOC or just cross-sell other opportunities. So recapture is definitely something that we talk about with clients a lot. And just another hot topic, which is why we're doing this, of course, is a lot of clients come to us and say, we think we might want to bring servicing in-house. What would that look like? And what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? So clients are looking at that. And, again, it's just a lot of things moving and shaking in this environment, I feel like.
That's a great background. And Andrew, from your 100 plus clients, what are you seeing sort of as that changing landscape in the thing? I know Mignon hit on a couple of great topics: recapture, data, technology, AI. You're not allowed to have a presentation, by the way, in mortgage unless you mentioned AI 15 times. So we're up to 3.
Right.
But Andrew, what are you seeing?
Yeah. So first of all, by the way, Seth, don't worry about getting me into trouble. I have plenty of opportunity to do that on my own. So again, I think the biggest shift here is almost feels like a little bit of a renaissance for servicing that, in the many years that you and I have known each other, I think we've both seen kind of back office utility player to now this strategic weapon. And I think it really falls into 4 categories. One, and this really goes across all of financial services, servicers can no longer benchmark themselves against other servicers because consumers are benchmarking their online experience across other retail providers that they have. So they're looking for chatbots, self-service, 24/7, 365 access. So it really changes not only what's available, but also the investment required to keep up. Second, just to double down on what Mignon mentioned on recapture, the analytics, both on marketing and portfolio analytics, have substantially increased, even predictive triggers, right, to help understand what could drive new originations and being a better partner to the original. And that's both in terms of AI, I'll add it out there again to improve efficiency, but also helping improve the call center experience and to even help with the complex regulatory environment where there's hundreds and thousands of regulations that AI can help organize. And then finally, there's an expectation to do more than just subservicing. So as I mentioned before, we offer more than just our subservicing agreement tools, but acting like mortgage bankers and providing liquidity to support our clients and allowing our customers to make investments in places that potentially could have greater returns.
I think that's a great summary, and I've kind of summarized what everyone has talked about, and I say it sort of just bluntly, but if you haven't explored what's out there in the subservicing space, the amount has been invested in technology and AI and other factors, that's 4 times we said AI, now it's 5. At the end of the day, it's really changed. It's gone from just sort of this central back office loan administration function into really a true partnership with folks. And if you're servicing in-house, and we don't want to make this, the white paper is very balanced, and we talk about both servicing in-house, pros and cons, and using a subservicer. But if you're one of those folks that has been servicing in-house for a long period of time, how do you actually define yourself as being good? And how do you actually know you're actually meeting the customer expectations? There's been a tremendous amount of money spent on the technology side by all the subservicers and servicers in-house, and you have to maintain that. It's not just good enough to have it today, but you really need to meet those needs in the future. And I think that's just where there are some definite advantages to the scale that, you saw how large many of those subservicers are. They're 10 times some of the banks that are servicing, or 7 times the banks. And so they just have more scale to be able to invest in the technology. So it is a very interesting spot that we're in. And we're going to move on to the next question here. In a self-serving mode, we don't have an answer for you, but there is no magic number. And as we were talking about drafting this white paper and trying to put it out for the industry to sort of digest, this was a question that we kept struggling with, and I kept emphasizing the following point on number of units. Number of units is something that needs to be considered, certainly from a cost standpoint. But more importantly, what's your strategy? What's your long-term strategy? What's your growth projections? How realistic are those growth projections? All of those have a really material impact on whether or not the units matter. But at the end of the day, I've been in shops where they very, very generic, couple investor types, very small geography, and they're very efficient at a small number of units. And then there's other shops out there that are very large, that use a subservicer. And so it really matters about the strategy. So if you're going to read the white paper, and hopefully you all do, there is not an answer in terms of the number of units. There's no magic number of units. I do believe at certain levels, there's this evaluation. And to Andrew's point, I'd strongly encourage everyone, whether or not they're using an in-house servicer or using a subservicer, this is something that you should evaluate on a periodic basis, probably annually, as to what your strategy is and does your current strategy fit within your servicing requirements. And is your servicing partner, whether they're in-house or external, are they performing where you need them to be? Can they offer you the data? Can they do the recapture? Can they do something else for you? Those are critical questions to answer. So that's enough of my rambling. Let's get to the experts. Mignon, from your standpoint, and you see, again, all the subservicers, and you're doing subservicing oversight for many, many folks. What's your opinion on the number of units? And I know there's not an answer in terms of number of units exactly, but what trends do you see with folks either trying to bring it in-house or take it to a subservicer?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've run the numbers and, we've kind of determined like an estimated number. Of course, this is aside from strategy. If you just want to look at the one thing or the one number is maybe around 50,000 units. But again, your strategy, I talked to a bank recently and they're in the southern part of the United States. They have that southern accent, and they said their customers want to call in and talk to people that sound like them. They want to hear that accent. There are certain strategies or certain customer base that you may want to consider when you're thinking about bringing servicing either in-house or putting it with a subservicer. Those are serious considerations. What do your customers expect? What are they looking for? What kind of relationship have you developed with them? What are your customers used to getting? And will they get that with a subservicer? Will they get something even better from a subservicer? You never know. And then what kind of tools or information are you looking for as a servicer? And what technology stack do you currently have? Because technology is very expensive. We know servicing platforms like Black Knight and others that are out there, it's very expensive. And that's a consideration when you're bringing servicing in-house or just starting it up in-house. And thinking about the technology spend with the other data analytics tools, compliance dashboards, and other things that subservicers have put together, would you as a servicer have the technology, the funds, the resources, the ability to set that up? Those data analytic tools, those borrower portals, a mobile app, things like that are very heavy investments that a lot of the subservicers are already dialed into. They're plugged in. You sign up with a subservicer and you automatically get to leverage that technology, and your customers get to use that technology. So again, it really depends on where your strategy lies, as Seth explained, and just a lot of other considerations.
And Andrew, from your standpoint, obviously you've got customers that are across a wide breadth of volumes that they give, that you subservice for. What trends are you kind of seeing in this space?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what you just mentioned in terms of that there is no one number. I think it really comes down to internal expertise and efficiency, and most certainly strategy, right? I think when you and I first met, I was in a bank-owned mortgage company, and that had a lot to do with decisions around where is the best place to deploy capital. And that could be very, very different from organization to organization. Often it might also relate around just having the expertise in-house. There has been a trend recently around, individuals, forgive the term, aging out and no longer having the expertise that's necessary to handle either decisions around compliance and risk and technology. So again, our clients range all the way from single-digit thousands to hundreds of thousands, and across the whole spectrum of all the different types of organizations that I mentioned before. So I wish there was a simple answer on a number, but at the same time, I think we find commonality across organizations that have decided that they don't have the right expertise, or that they would prefer to deploy their capital in different ways. Probably most importantly, which I think I know you cover within the white paper, is moving to a variable expense, but a predictable variable expense is often a really important decision for organizations, which is why a subservicer can be a big advantage for them, at least on the cost side.
Yeah, that variable cost is a big thing, and across Ritchie May, we see that across a number of platforms where there's greater use of outsourcing. Right, there's greater use of outsourcing for accounting, for cyber, for external review of subservicers, and that variable cost or not having that body is important. And so again, there's no right unit. If you read the paper and you didn't see a number mentioned, that's purposeful, because we just didn't want to kind of assign a bright light that at X you should do this. I think Andrew's point up front was, regardless of your size, you should be talking about this at a minimum in part of your strategy sessions at least once a year, right? And then if your strategy is changing, i.e. growing or shrinking, that should also have an impact as to whether or not servicing in-house or a sub-servicing model makes sense.
I was going to mention one other thing, Seth, speaking about that, the scalability that you mentioned. Okay, so strategy, you may be growing, shrinking, and using a subservicer, you can easily scale that based upon that strategy. If you plan to sell off loans, or are you building your portfolio, all of those things can change from year to year too, right? You may have the strategy today of building that portfolio, but 6 months from now or 8 months from now, you decide that you need to sell off some loans. So it can change, and using a subservicer is very easy from that aspect, that they can scale up and down very easily.
And that dovetails very nicely, Mignon, into our next question here about the common mistakes lenders make in determining their servicing strategy. And I'll name a few, and I know you can name a few. And this is a question where, if Andrew wants to get himself in trouble, he can answer this as well. But I think from my standpoint, what we see people stumble on in determining this servicing strategy is, one, they just don't get out the flat out complexity of delinquencies. They really don't understand the volume of vendors and how difficult it is. And to speak to scale, when you have even one delinquent loan, you still need that staff, if you've in-housed it, to service that loan appropriately. And they may be completely underutilized if you don't have enough delinquencies. Now, we all know you don't want necessarily to be servicing delinquent loans because of the cost structure, but you still need to have that fixed infrastructure in place. And that's one of the real advantages of using a subservicer, is you make it Andrew's problem. He's got a staff for this rise of delinquencies, or he's got a staff for this national disaster that occurred in our areas. And they're much more scalable than you could ever be, even with remote workforces. So that's one thing that we see as a common mistake, is just really underestimating how difficult it is when there's an event, i.e. a fire, a flood, a hurricane. Like, can you get enough staff if in-house to actually help those people and help them appropriately is a huge risk. It's a financial risk. It's an operational risk. There's huge risks around if you don't service those customers appropriately. The other piece, and that I'll say, and this is mentioned in the paper, so we're stealing a little bit from the paper, but at the end of the day, what we see, one of the common mistakes is they hire somebody that always brings servicing in-house. And that becomes the internal champion to bring servicing in-house. So they bring this person in, he or she has brought servicing in the past. The rest of the management team isn't really as highly engaged or even sort of aware of all the potential pitfalls. And then that person leaves either upon completion of bringing it in-house or midway through. And all of a sudden, the rest of the management team's kind of looking around going, why did we bring it in-house? Well, because we hired so-and-so and that was their job and they're not here anymore. And now you're sort of stuck in this hot mess situation in between. So those are two common mistakes we see. Mignon, I know you've seen others. Do you want to share a few others that either in the paper or not in the paper?
Definitely. Yeah, I've had a few instances and conversations with clients. One of them, their strategy was to bring it in-house from a sub-servicer. They were going to grow their portfolio. And then the next year things changed and they sold off their whole portfolio and had to put it back with a subservicer, just a handful of loans. And they were already in a contract with a servicing platform that they couldn't get out of, So again, strategies change. I've had a couple of other clients. One of them, they wanted to bring servicing in-house. They got a list of the call volume for their portfolio for a particular period of time. And they thought that they could handle it, before they saw the volume. When they got that report, they were like, wow, they were very surprised. And they thought, okay, there's no way we can handle that type of call volume. We'd have to add, X number of staff. And it just based on the work, a lot of times you don't realize how much work your subservicer is doing. I had another client that was bringing servicing in-house this fall, or kind of late summer was the plan. And they didn't realize and weren't prepared for the year-end activities that they were going to have to do. So once that was brought up, they, kind of had to switch gears a little bit. But there's a lot of activities that your subservicer handles for you that a lot of the servicers don't fully grasp everything that's being done for them. And to bring it in-house, there's just a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to consider. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of bringing it in-house sometimes that will occur. Just the number of activities, and then like Seth mentioned, the number of vendors that you're going to have to manage and oversee becomes a very large task as well.
And we're not going to let... We'll let Andrew get himself in trouble and chime in here.
Yeah, so again, I would say in addition to vendors, I think the piece we haven't touched on is, independent of what happens in Washington around federal regulations, we know that the states are taking a much more active role in regulation of servicers. And two things. One, if an organization is not prepared for that, that becomes an issue. And in the event an organization is thinking about growing to other states, that's an expertise that they need to acquire. So we, among other subservicers, have expertise in all 50 states, right? We spend lots of time with regulators working on behalf of our clients. So the responsibility moves from actually conducting those exams to oversight of us. And again, it's still a very important function for an organization to have oversight over their subservicer, but it's a very different level of expertise and scale of employees that it takes to do that. So, a mistake on not understanding a key state's regulatory infrastructure could be devastating for an organization versus, in our case, we're working with all 50 states and the OCC on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would echo that, because a lot of the clients that I've talked to, they may have a robust compliance staff on the origination side and think that those individuals could also handle servicing, but it's a very different world between originations and servicing and the compliance environment there. And usually you need some, very specifically trained and skilled employees to handle the compliance aspects on servicing, and having a robust 3 lines of defense, which your subservicers are going to have. They're going to have that built out. They're doing constant audits and internal monitoring, and having to build that out for some of our clients would be very, very costly. So it's another thing to consider for sure.
And the final point I'll bring up before we're going to turn it back to Andrew to kind of highlight some of the things with Sunlar is 2 points. One of the other common things we see is, well, we service portfolio loans. How hard can it be to service Fannie Mae loans? And portfolio loans are very different. Those are your loans. Those are your standards typically. That's your credit risk. And anytime you're starting to service for others, Fannie, Freddie, or Ginnie, even private securitizations, that is a different level of expectation. It's a different level of risk. Both Andrew and I were at a very large bank, right? Portfolio loans, you could give principal forgiveness for, because it's our money. If we want to forgive principal, it's our money. You can't do that with Fannie or Freddie or Ginnie. And so really understanding how different and how you're bound by the servicing guides is a critical element that I think people that service portfolio loans in-house don't really understand how big a leap it is to get to sort of agency servicing and all those requirements. All right, Andrew. So we've prepped you for this. You've got the last slide, and so this is going to come into. I'm going to make a comment, and Andrew's going to talk about some of the highlights that Cenlar offers. But as part of the paper, one of the things we really highlighted was make sure you align yourself, if you're going to use a subservicer, with a subservicer that meets your needs. This is like dating. This is like getting to know them. And can they service what you want? Can they give you the technology you want? Can they give you the AI you want? Can they do the interfaces that you need? Really understanding the differences across the subservicers is really critical. They are different. They've all emphasized different elements. They've all expanded into different roles. So really making sure you sort of line yourself up with the appropriate subservicer is critical. It's not a vendor. If you think this is just another vendor relationship, you are very misguided at this point. This is a strategic partner. And so, Andrew, kind of for the last canned question before we go to some of the Q&A that we've got in there, what are some of the advantages of Cenlar that you could offer to your current customers, prospective customers, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you, Seth. So a couple things. I mentioned this at the top of the call as well. First, we're exclusively focused in on subservicing. You could almost say, maniacally focused in on just that. So all our investments are poured into subservicing and not competing with our clients for the same customers that they've worked so hard to acquire. So I would say there, 4 different areas where Cenlar excels. One, on the scale side, and really not scale for scale's sake, but that allows us to drive great pricing for our clients, and it also allows us to make investments in the technology and regulatory infrastructure that we talked about, and allows us to service every conceivable product for thousands of investors. So it offers great flexibility to our clients. Second, on the technology side, we've developed best-in-class client experiences, and I'm going to say it for the 12th time, and AI and cybersecurity investments that have improved the client experience. We also take a lot of care to make, also made within the white paper, that our experience with consumers mirrors that of what our clients expect. So we spend a lot of time understanding some of those cultural nuances and making sure our team is properly trained to represent the brand. Many of our clients are working in a white label or private label, however you want to define it, relationship, which is really critical. And there are organizations that is actually their bigger driver. Separatory side times, right? We are saying we're actually regulated by the OCC, and we are under what's referred to as heightened standards, which means we are regulated like a $50 billion bank. And what that means to our clients is they can have the confidence that we're complying with all the thousands of rules that are involved in servicing and helping with that complexity. And finally, I'll say our leadership team is made up of mortgage bankers. We have held some of the same roles that our clients have across banks, credit unions, IMBs. And so we know it's important as a servicer not to work in isolation, but to work with the rest of the organization as well. So customer retention should drive new originations. Keep customers happy so that loan officers are happy with their servicer, or developing financing solutions that can help create some liquidity for our clients. So, but let me, one more thing, Seth, again, I want to thank the Richie May and the whole team for pulling this together. Really, really important decision. This question of in-house or subservicer is something we come across every day with our prospects and our clients at time. And that decision, whether or not you decide to subservice or remain in-house, we believe, we're confident we're the best partner on the subservicing side. but having that conversation, really digging into that strategy, and the white paper, I think, is a really good template on how to make that decision.
Well, we appreciate the kind comments, and as we said, all the participants will be getting this white paper, a preview of it, because of it before we release it out to the masses next week. And we felt like the industry was sort of needed this. And while it doesn't give you all the answers, at least it starts the journey. With that, we do have a few minutes for questions and answers. So Mignon, I'm going to go to you with the first one. And it was kind of mentioned earlier, and Andrew, you might want to weigh on this as well. But Mignon, from your standpoint, what does it look like, or how does one go about sort of outsourcing that subservicing oversight function? And what are the kind of the pros and cons of outsourcing that function? And then Andrew, from your perspective, i.e. Cenlar, how advantageous is it that Mignon could come in and do, 30 clients in one audit versus, 30 individual audits? So I'll start with you, Mignon, and then Andrew, you might want to kind of weigh in from your perspective as somebody that's been audited by Mignon. But Mignon, can you just kind of walk the audience through a little bit more what subservicing oversight looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks a little different depending on how large you are as an IMB or the master servicer. A lot of times what we see is either one person or maybe 3 to 5 people, depending again on the size, helping to oversee that relationship with the subservicer. And then how Richie May can help is we can help with the annual onsite. So every year we're on site with Cenlar, asking them all the questions of how they stay compliant with all the regulations. We meet with the heads of each different servicing area, escrow, collections, loss mit, everybody. And we ask them all the tough questions. We look at all their policies and procedures. We review their SOC report. We review their audited financials, all of those things to help you make sure as a master servicer that you have partnered with a strong partner, because as Seth mentioned earlier, it is a very strategic partnership. And so you want to do that due diligence every year on that subservicer. And then throughout the year, what that team of 1 to 5 people or, something like that, somewhere around there, you'll want to have those people look at the monthly and weekly reports that you get from your subservicer. They're keeping an eye on the portfolio, looking at if there's any disasters in their portfolio that they need to, have on their radar. They're communicating regularly with the subservicer. They're paying attention to consumer complaints and going back and forth with the subservicer to resolve those consumer complaints, and just really overseeing them in general. A lot of times we see a scorecard, so they're looking at certain performance metrics that they may have in their contract with the subservicer. So they could be measuring those SLAs and have some kind of KPI metrics that they're looking at and holding their subservicer accountable. We can also help at Richie May with ongoing loan level testing throughout the year, monthly or quarterly testing, or you can do that in-house if you have a large enough team. A lot of times those clients that have a larger team are doing monthly or quarterly loan level testing, looking to make sure that the subservicer is handling their collections and loss mit and all of the things correctly, escrow disbursements, and doing their escrow analyses on time. So definitely your oversight is a process, and it takes a few people to coordinate that, but it is definitely a lot less work than having servicing in-house, of course. So depending on the size of your team and organization, sometimes that's where you start. If you want to start retaining servicing, and maybe you haven't retained servicing in the past, but you want to start retaining servicing, sometimes that's the best way to get started with servicing is, have it with a subservicer and get that oversight team up and running and managing that subservicer relationship.
And Andrew, I'm not asking you to comment how great it is when Mignon comes into your shop, but from your perspective, can you just share generically, like how many audits are probably going on at Cenlar today? Like, and how many you do throughout a year?
A lot, and I think that goes back to, so I will say that we enjoy Mignon's audits, and again, it makes us better as well, right? And I think having that type of approach, I think everybody's role should be in risk and compliance and understanding, how that can make us better as an organization. But, there's not a day that goes by where we are not actively participating with some audit from some state or from one of our investors. And I think that is one of the key areas that is probably underestimated by some in-house servicers on what that load is. And especially if you're branching out and you decide to become licensed in another state, that can become a very, very difficult proposition. So we have experience working with every conceivable jurisdiction and know what it takes to remain successful. So if that's an area, again, some organizations, I think Mignon mentioned it earlier, view the fact that they understand compliance, but it might be just from the origination lens and not as strong on the servicing side. But oversight is still necessary, right? You are not outsourcing responsibility for your vendor, in this case, the subservicer. There still needs to be a oversight function, but nowhere near the type of investment that's necessary if you're doing it yourself.
No, and I think that's great.
One other thing I'll add is, right, it's a very participative process that if there is an audit for one of our clients, because we understand how to work with a variety of different regulators, we can help with those responses, right? We know the meaning behind some of the questions, and we're really a partner in terms of how those audits are conducted. It's not a, throw it over the fence or a very clinical response to questions. Our success in those audits are a reflection of the success of our clients.
And I'm going to emphasize a couple of things that both of you all mentioned. One, it's a partnership too. Like, where I hear complaints about a subservicer is that the owner of the MSR, the licensed entity, is like, the subservicer does everything, I don't know what they're doing. The active engagement with your subservicer is critical, making sure that you're having those weekly, bi-weekly, monthly calls with those SLAs is critically important, because there's a lot of information Cenlar will be providing back. But if you're not using it, if you're not communicating that through the organization, then the subservicers sometimes get painted into a bad light that, well, it's their fault. And a lot of times what we'll find is that it's actually the person isn't interacting with their subservicer at the right level. And that's creating the tension, as opposed to, like I said earlier, it's not just another vendor. You got to have the SLAs, you got to have those conversations. And you'll find Cenlar and the other subservicers, man, they're more than willing to engage. Like that's good for them. They want that feedback. But if you just kind of like hands off, they're supposed to do everything for me. That's not really a good relationship, and that's not really a good partnership. All right, we got time for one quick question, and I'll answer it very quickly. But we got a couple of questions in around if you purchase or sell MSRs, does that sort of change your strategy? And the answer is, look, if there's a lot of operational lift needed, i.e. that I'm buying a lot of units or selling a lot of units, I don't want to control those fixed costs. I want that to be Andrew's problem with Cenlar. So I'd much rather that be a subservicing. If there's a lot of units coming in or out, I think some people struggle with staffing for that level of activity, and that's much easier to have an outsourced relationship. So if you're an entity that buys a lot of servicing or sells a lot of servicing, a subservicer might be a better option for you, because those resources are scalable again at a subservicer, where they're very difficult to potentially scale in-house. With that, I'd like to thank Andrew and Mignon for joining us today, and everyone on the call. You will be getting a copy of the deck, and you will be getting the preview or the white paper. We strongly encourage you to do that and read it. Please, if you have any questions about the white paper, we are happy to reply to you, engage with you at the appropriate level. If we didn't get to your questions, we will follow up with you individually. If you haven't filled out the survey, please do. We do take the feedback seriously, like less Seth talking, more Mignon and Andrew talking. Probably half of you will have that as a comment. We do use that feedback to craft our future webinars, less Seth, more other people. And again, you could download that deck already on the side if you have not. And you'll receive early access to that white paper that we've been highlighting earlier today. I've got a copy right here on my desk. But thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Sendlar. And we hope to see you in a future webinar in the near future. Everyone have a very safe holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.